So what is the morally right thing to do, not necessarily the right thing to do? It's a question that has haunted moral philosophy for a long, long time, and to this day is one of the most difficult concepts for most people to wrap their minds around. Thankfully, we have a few really good examples throughout, in fiction that we can look to. And one of my favorite examples, and one of what I think is one of the best examples of this conundrum, comes from Stephen King's The Green Mile. Now, if you aren't familiar with The Green Mile, it came out in the 90s. I forget exactly what years, but Stephen King released it as a book in the 90s, and then it actually got a movie adaptation. And it is one of my favorite books / movies of all time because it is just such a deep story. There's a lot to it. So we're going to talk about that today, and I'm going to highlight a couple of things in the book itself. But first, I want to fill you in a little bit in case you aren't familiar with what The Green Mile is about. So Paul Edgecomb is the leader of a group of guards at the Cold Mountain State Penitentiary, and they work on death row. They call it the Green Mile because it's painted this olive drab kind of green, right? And one day, one of the inmates that comes on there, his name is John Coffey, and John, he's a big, real tall black guy. This is the 1930s, so to add a little bit of context there, and he's been convicted of killing 2 young white girls. And it was a really, really rough trial. There's a lot that happened with it. So this guy comes on the death row, but he seems from the very beginning not like your typical kind of like ruthless killer. He's afraid of the dark. He's got a lot of like little intricacies that make him this really deep. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense for the guards overall. Over time, as they come to find out, John Coffey actually was innocent of the crime that he was convicted of. And not only that, to make it a little bit more complicated, he has the special ability, this power to heal people who are sick and dying. The first example of this comes when Paul himself, he's got a bladder infection or a kidney stone or something like that. And, he's having a lot of trouble with it. He's in a lot of pain. And he's standing there on the row by himself, and John Coffey's like, "Hey, come over to me. Come over here. I got to talk to you." So he walks over, and John grabs him, and he puts his hands on him, and this weird feeling takes place, and then all of a sudden, John lets go, and he lets his like little black bug-like creatures out of his mouth, and they all dissipate, right? And Paul finds that he's healed. And then they wind up a little bit later. There's a mouse. A mouse is one of the inmates has as like a little pet, right? And it gets crushed by one of the guards, and it's like dying. It's getting really close to dying, and John grabs it and he puts his hands around it, and he's able to basically suck out the death, the damage that's been done. And the mouse is basically good as new with just a little limp, right? And then finally, he winds up healing the warden's wife, who is dying. She's got a brain tumor it's inoperable. They can't do anything about it. And they wind up breaking John Coffey out of prison, taking him to the warden's house. He goes in the house, and he's able to suck the cancer out and cure this woman. It's this magical, crazy set of circumstances. And then they find out that John was actually innocent of the crime that he was convicted of. He didn't actually kill the girls that he was convicted of killing. And it's this wild thing. And so we get to the point where Paul and the other guards are trying to figure out, how are we going to handle this? What do we do with this situation? Because we know this guy's innocent. We know he has this ability that it seems like this God-given ability to heal people. It's not right that we would put him in the electric chair. We can't kill this man. This is insane, right? And it's a moral conundrum that they have to figure out. And I want to highlight, I'm going to read a couple passages from the book. This is a book. So my grandmother got me the Green Mile back in the 90s. That copy got all torn up. My daughter actually got me a new version. This is the complete serial novel. This was a special edition they released after the movie came out. So I'm going to read a couple of things from this to highlight where we're going with this. So the first is later in the book, after they have discussed what they're going to do, because they're trying to figure out whether they should free John or whether they should put him in the electric chair. And they finally make the decision, we have to go through with it. We don't have a choice. We don't have another way to handle. We can't break him out. We'll lose our jobs. We could risk. There's too much at stake, right? And one of the guards, Brutal, is talking to John, and John said, or Paul, sorry, when Brutal is talking to Paul, and Paul says, it says, I looked at him to make sure he wasn't joking. I didn't think he was. Paul says, what do you mean? And then Brutal responds, I mean, we're fixing to kill a gift of God, one that never did any harm to us or anyone else. What am I going to say if I end up standing in front of God, the Father Almighty, and he asks me to explain why I did it? That it was my job? My job? So right there is the moral, like the question, and we're getting into deontology a little bit with that. And it's the question of whether it's right or wrong, whether it's morally right or wrong from a deontological standpoint. If God gave this guy this power, how would you explain if you died and you wound up standing in front of God? Well, yeah, it was my job. I had to kill him. I couldn't set him free. I would have gotten fired and wound up in jail myself. Well, I couldn't do that. How would you explain that? But here's where it gets a little bit more complicated, because later on, Paul is talking to John prior to him being put in the electric chair, and he's asking him for final wishes and that kind of thing. And John has his own views. He knows what's going on. He knows what Paul's thinking. So John says, you and Mr. Howell and the other boss has been good to me. I know you've been worrying, but you ought to quit on it now because I want to go, boss. And this seems a little bit odd to Paul, but John goes on. I'm rightly tired of the pain I hear and feel, boss. I'm tired of being on the road, lonely as a robin in the rain, never having nobody to go on with or to tell me where he's coming from or going to or why. I'm tired of people being ugly to each other. It feels like pieces of glass in my head. I'm tired of all the times I wanted to help, but I couldn't. I'm tired of being in the dark. Mostly it's the pain. There's too much. If I could end it, I would, but I can't. So John wants to go. He's in a bad place. He's got this gift, but he's not been able to use it properly, and he always feels everything else around him. He feels the things that people think and the things that people feel and the hatred that they feel towards each other. It's insane, the level of like just pain he must be in, right? So morally speaking, from a deontological standpoint, as Brutal pointed out, if you're looking at it from a God-given gift, it's hard to say that the morally right thing to do would be to kill him, because realistically, morally speaking, unless a God has commanded it from a deontological standpoint, it's not going to be morally right normally. And most duty-based ethics looks at our duty to one another, to take care of one another, to look out for one another. And John himself is innocent of the crime that he was convicted of, which means there's not like any kind of retribution there. There's no duty to kill him after he has, for the crimes that he didn't commit, right? So from a deontological standpoint, it's almost cut and dry in a lot of ways. But when we look at it from a utilitarian standpoint, it gets even more difficult, because utilitarianism is all about the greater good. It's all about taking care of society, consequentialism, looking at what are the consequences of these actions, how is this going to affect us down the road? And by putting John Coffey in the electric chair, you're potentially taking away the ability to heal other people, like he does with Melinda, the wife of the warden. She had cancer. It was inoperable. There's nothing they could do. How many other people could John save? And that's not just Melinda. What about children? What if you could walk down to a ward at a children's hospital type of situation and have John put hands on each one of them and heal each one of them? So the right thing to do from both a deontological and utilitarian standpoint, morally speaking, is to keep him alive, to free him from prison, to keep him hidden, or whatever you have to do. And it's the 1930s, so it's not like they have cameras or anything like that. They'll have a hard time tracking him down, probably. But you got to find some way from a moral standpoint. However, this is where it becomes really complicated, because John doesn't want that. John wants to go. He's tired. He's been through so much. He can't take the pain anymore. And is it right to make him suffer to save other people, maybe? Is it right to put him through that kind of pain? How much pain is one person supposed to go through to stop the pain of other people? And so as a guard at Cold Mountain, and for Paul and the rest of the guards, it's an impossible situation. What do you do when, morally speaking, you should do something? What if a parent comes to them after it comes out that John Coffey had the ability to do this, but we've electrocuted him, and a parent comes out and says, my kid is dying. They're going to be dead within weeks, and John could have saved them. How would you explain to that parent, I'm sorry, we had to, he wanted to go. He didn't want to be here anymore. Most people wouldn't understand that. Most people have a hard time dealing with that. So from that angle, if you are directly impacted, or you could have been directly impacted, it would be really difficult to deal with. But again, when do you not honor somebody's wishes? If John wants to go, it's the right thing to do to let him go, isn't it? If he is in such a mental state, if he's being tortured by these thoughts that he's getting from other people, these feelings from other people, is it right to push him and force him almost into like a type of slavery if he doesn't want to be there? Let's say you could find a way to do that. Let's say you could find a way to force him to heal people. Never mind the fact that he could just refuse. But John's not the kind of person, when you get into the story and you kind of get to know him a little bit, he's not the kind that would refuse. He's the kind that would just go along with it because he's being told to do it. He doesn't understand why. He just knows that he's being told to. That's why he heals people. He doesn't know why he does it. He just gets these inclinations, these feelings that are put on him to heal this person. When they go to Melinda, when they go to the warden's wife, before they get ready, the guards are all kind of prepping for everything, and they haven't told John what's going on, but he already knows. And when Paul walks up to John, he even says something along the lines of, Paul asks him, do you know where we're taking you? And John's like, yeah, there's a sick lady. I'm going to help the sick lady. He already knows. So he's got all of this stuff that's been going on, and he knows all this stuff. And is it right to force him into that? Before you say yes, before you say, well, yeah, if I was sick or if my child was sick, I would want him to heal them. Put yourself in John's shoes and think about how miserable that would be. And would that be worth it? Would you go through all that? Would you be willing to take on that much pain? Most of us wouldn't be. So it's an interesting philosophical debate because there's not really a right answer. The obvious emotional right answer is let John have his peace. Let him sit in the electric chair. Let him have what he wants because he wants to go. That's the emotional answer. That's the answer that like Paul and the guards go with. They're going to risk their jobs. They're going to risk their lives. Not to mention the possible, if they're caught and John winds up being executed anyway, and now they're also in jail. So there's all of those things. But even if they could get away with it, that's a lot to live with. That's a lot to put on yourself. That's a lot to think about. Emotionally speaking, we just took away this man's rights. We just took away this man's ability to do with his own body what he wanted to do. And the fact that he wanted to die, we took that away from him. And that's not really right. But it's also counter to the moral arguments. And that's why it's such an interesting and deep thing. There's a lot of media out there that tries to get at this type of thing, that tries to have these moral versus emotional kind of debates. But most of the time, at least from a deontological or utilitarian standpoint, you can usually argue that something is morally right and line it up with the right thing to do. In this case, you really can't. From deontology and utilitarianism, both systems would say, no, the morally right thing to do is not to kill an innocent man in the electric chair and to have him heal other people, because the greater good and making sure, doing the right thing by other people. But the emotional thing, the thing that feels right, the thing that I would argue is right, is to just hook and put him in the electric chair. And in the end, that's what they wind up doing. And the one final request he gets is they don't put the hood on him because he's afraid of the dark. And that's a very powerful sentiment. And there's other topics to be discussed potentially with this down the road, as far as the death penalty and that kind of thing, whether that's ethical or moral. But that's for another video. And this one, I just wanted to talk about this one specific debate because it is so interesting. And I want to know in the comments, what would you do if you were in Paul's position? You're the head guard of the penitentiary, and you have this guy that you know is innocent, that can heal people by just laying hands on them. You've seen it happen. You know it happens. But your job is to put him in the electric chair and he wants to go. How would you handle that? What would you do? Let's have a discussion down in the comments. Keep it civil. People are going to disagree from time to time, and you got to understand other people's viewpoints. But I want to hear what you guys think. And I also am looking for other suggestions for media that you would like. I've got a suggestion from a couple of videos ago. I'm going to be covering The Thing at some point. There's an interesting moral conversation to be had there. There's a few others I've got on the list of videos and movies I want to cover here, as well as books. And like I said, I'm trying to expand into other things: books, movies, TV shows. Trying to get out and do different types of things. So let me know what you would like to see me talk about next. But with that being said, that's all I've got for this one. I want to thank you all for watching. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.